Princeton Digital Group, or PDG as we go by. We are a Singapore headquartered Pan-Asia data center operator. So we build greenfield as well as make acquisitions. We do telco carve-outs. So as of today, we are in 4 countries: in Indonesia, Singapore, China, and India. We have about 18 projects, 10 of them in operation and 8 of various stages of development, totaling about 350 megawatts across our 4 countries and these 18 projects. We got founded about a little over 3 years ago when my co-founder and I started this company with the view of creating a Pan-Asia single brand, kind of a single solution approach to hyperscalers. And we've been backed by Warburg Pincus and Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. Warburg was our founding investor, and since then they've continued to invest. And Ontario Teachers came in late last year. So and with these investors, of course, we have raised some debt as well along the way in China and coming up in Singapore as well. So overall, our focus is primarily on hyperscalers and serving them across these markets and the new markets that we plan to enter.
That's great. So you entered, India through greenfields, and then China and Indonesia through acquisitions. So a number of different strategies. But as you think about all 3 of them, would love to kind of get your perspective on the demand environment. Is it uniformly, broadly similar across all 3, or what are some of the differences that you would kind of point out between those 3 countries around demand?
Sure, Jonathan. From our investment approach, I'll take a minute to talk about that, and then go into the customer side. From an investment perspective, we, as I mentioned, we go across different ways to make our acquisition. In Singapore, we made an acquisition. We bought a data center from IO, which is used to be an American operator. That was an outright acquisition. And then in Indonesia, we did a carve-out from a telco. We bought 5 data centers from XL Axiata, which is a second largest telecom operator in Indonesia. And in China, we did a couple of things. First, we entered through a joint venture with 21 Mayanet, and then we started building greenfield of our own. And for example, in Shanghai, we have a 42 megawatt campus that was actually a brownfield, where we bought a factory, a solar panel manufacturing factory, and converted that to a data center campus. And we brought that to service in December, a few months ago. And the one in India you touched upon is a greenfield. We building a 48 megawatt campus in Mumbai, and that's going to be coming to operations about within 24 months. So each of this approach we have taken are different. In China, we continue to buy land as well. So in Nanjing and Nantong, we announced a total of 100 megawatts, which is complete greenfield. We bought land and we're building ourselves. So across these markets, we have taken different approaches, and we have the capabilities and the kind of capital that helps, kind of makes it possible for us to take these different approaches to build scale very quickly across these markets. And from a market demand, market demand, so from a market demand perspective, Jonathan, each of these market dynamics are a little different. As we know, Singapore operates more as a hub market. So the scale of the Singapore market is driven by what the Asia Pac growth is being seen by the hyperscalers. And then we go into each of the countries. China, as you know, is probably now the second largest data center market in the world, and continues to grow in double digits, 15 to 18% year over year. And there, the scale has gone into significant double-digit kind of megawatt acquisitions that customers typically look at in a typical transaction of capacity acquisition. And that's the kind of the scale we see in China. Then you come to India. We see India where China was about 5-6 years ago. You're seeing kind of a 5 to 10 megawatt kind of acquisitions going on, and you can see the roadmap over the next couple of years. That's going to start hitting into double-digit kind of acquisition scale in India. And Indonesia, it's kind of where India was about 5 years ago. The early stages of what the hyperscalers are doing is getting in their edge nodes. Edge is what they call as edge, is kind of getting some of the workloads into in-country. And we are seeing smaller capacities there, 1 to 3 megawatt kind of scale in Indonesia at this stage. And if the trend continues to see what happened in India and China, we're going to see a massive explosive growth in Indonesia in the coming years as well. So that's kind of the 4 markets and the dynamics in each of the markets.
No, that's great. And then, some of these markets have additional geographies, right? So you planted one location in India, China China, you know, through the JV, you've got exposure to different cities. But as you think about your growth within each geography and where you're going to be deploying perhaps the greatest amount of megawatts of additional capacity, which are the ones where it's relatively more straightforward to add capacity? So that would be kind of a development question. And then, which do you see as the most target rich in terms of active demand?
Yeah, Jonathan, from a city location perspective, each of the countries have different dynamics and, of course, challenges of how you enter the market and be able to do development or acquisitions. So in China, the three big markets that continue to be very strategic for the customers continue to be Beijing, Shanghai, and the Shenzhen area. So we have, of course, in Shanghai and the Shanghai region, which includes Nanjing, Nantong locations that I talked about. So that continues to be a very important market for hyperscalers. Then Beijing, which has always been a very large market, and the overall metropolitan area of Beijing has expanded. So whether it's Langfang or other areas, that continues to be growing. So Beijing is a very important market. Then coming to Shenzhen, that's again the third market that we see continued growth and maybe even some spillover from Hong Kong in the coming years. So these are three big locations. We continue to make investments, and we have pipeline of acquisitions in Shenzhen as well as in Beijing, which will continue to come out to market in the coming quarters. So that's on China. Then you come to India. The two big cities in India for hyperscalers continue to be Mumbai and Chennai. Both are very dense submarine cable landing, both to the east side and from the west side. And then Delhi, which is the capital city, has kind of the second tier city, but it continues to grow at a decent pace. So these are three kind of major cities, and we are actively building a pipeline in Chennai and Delhi as well. And there are kind of a couple of other important cities that kind of play a decent role in the hyperscaler market. That's Pune and Bangalore, Hyderabad, that area. Now coming to Indonesia, the large part of the market is in the Jakarta area. I think that we continue to see grow in Jakarta and the Jakarta surrounding area, of course, driven by power and connectivity, availability, and those kind of things. There are sub-clusters that will get formed. Right now, there are a couple of clusters, one in CBD and one in the Cibitung area. That's where we are. And that we believe will continue to grow, and some other locations will come up in Jakarta area. So these are kind of the dynamics in these three markets. And of course, there are a lot of activity. People are looking at tier 2 cities, but we are focused on purely on the large tier 1 cities that I just mentioned, Jonathan. From a ease of doing or making acquisitions or growing, building bottoms up, each of the nuances in each of these countries. So we are careful in what how we can minimize our execution risk as well as time to market, and balancing those things. We make the choices, and of course, some of the insights that we gain from our customers in making those choices.
So I want to open it up to everybody, and a very broad-based question, but it kind of gets to government regulation. Darren talked about the Singapore pause or freeze, on new permitting clearly affecting demand in Jakarta. And I guess the general question I want to ask for each of you is going to be maybe a different answer by jurisdiction, but is there anything that you see, whether it's policy, regulatory, or others, that could lead to a different flavor of demand than what we're currently seeing in the market? So that could be data sovereignty. I can imagine that it's been talked about in India for a while, but anything from a macro standpoint that could lead demand from hyperscalers, whether it's in India or Indonesia or China or elsewhere, Australia, to pursue a little bit of a different trajectory than what we've been observing. So I'm going to maybe call on Rangu first, and then we can go around.
So Jonathan, in terms of there are two areas that's from a policy perspective that's impacting our industry. One is on things like data privacy and localization you talked about. I think each of the countries in Asia or around the world are dealing with these legislative issues, and I think we are going to see a lot more of that coming to the industry. And that has in many ways increased the capacity needs for data center because of localization. There's going to be a lot more need for capacity in the country, which doesn't take away some of the regional hub capacity, but at the same time, we're going to see a lot more capacity need because of things like data privacy and localization. Then there's the other issue on policy when it comes to power and things like that. I think that is something that almost every country that we are seeing is grappling with this issue. On one hand, policymakers recognize the importance of data centers because of all the digitization efforts going on in those countries. They do recognize the importance of the growth of the data center market. On the other hand, they are seeing the massive challenges with power, and all the countries have made significant commitments to the Paris Accord and are trying to figure out how do we bring the carbon emission down on the data center side, which is becoming a large consumer of power. So I think we as an industry, I do believe, have a role to play to educate the policymakers than a lot more than we have done. I think in each of these countries, we as an industry help the government to understand the challenges, but not kind of do a short-term view on things of moratorium or other ways to kind of decelerate the growth of the market. So I think I do see a role for the industry to come together in each of these countries to help the policymakers. I think there's a big gap in what the policymakers understand in terms of what it takes to build this sector.